In Chapter 1, Lin reflects on her new role as Emperor, realizing the immense responsibility and constant challenges ahead. She feels the weight of her father's legacy and the difficulties in rebuilding the empire. Lin secretly climbs the palace roof, avoiding her guards and reflecting on the secrecy and paranoia that surrounded her father's reign. She explores the hidden parts of the palace, including the cavernous room where her father had experimented. She discovers a key, leading her to a hidden hatch beneath the stone floor. As she descends into the darkness, she finds shelves filled with books and notes that may hold crucial answers. However, she is startled when the light from her lantern reveals monstrous eyes staring back at her. Lin faces an unknown threat in the depths of her father's secret lair. In Chapter 2, Jovis reflects on his unexpected role as captain of the Imperial Guard, a position he feels unprepared for but is determined to fulfill. Mephi, his companion, insists on accompanying him on a covert mission to follow Lin, the Emperor. They track Lin through the palace, discovering she is sneaking into hidden tunnels beneath the palace, where she seems to be hiding something or someone. Jovis grows increasingly suspicious of Lin's actions, wondering what she's keeping from him. In the cavern, Lin encounters a dangerous construct, and Jovis steps in to protect her. As they chase the construct through the city's rooftops, Jovis grapples with his loyalties. Despite his attempts to assist Lin, the construct escapes, and Jovis is left contemplating the deeper mysteries surrounding Lin's rule and her connection to the constructs. The chapter ends with Jovis feeling uncertain about his role and what lies ahead. In Chapter 3, Lin continues to navigate the complexities of her new reign. She sneaks through the palace rooftops, struggling to maintain control and secrecy. After a tense encounter with Jovis, she reflects on her father's legacy, her rapid healing, and the growing tension around her rule. Jovis, who has been secretly following her, admits that he was once a smuggler and shares the painful story of his wife's death at her father's hands. As they converse in the alleyways, Lin questions their shared powers and the dangers they both face. Jovis reveals a startling new ability, manipulating water with his hands, a power reminiscent of the legendary Alanga. This revelation deepens Lin's understanding of the looming threats and the potential consequences of the powers they both wield. She quietly acknowledges that their paths are intertwined, with the Alanga's shadow hanging over them both. In Chapter 4, Lin continues to struggle with the responsibilities of ruling the Empire. She grapples with the implications of the Alanga's possible return, wondering if she and Jovis share their powers. Lin also faces the complex task of choosing a steward for the palace. After questioning a potential candidate, Mariah, she is attacked by the woman, who reveals herself as a member of the Alanga. Despite her combat skills, Mariah is killed by the palace guards after a violent confrontation. Lin is left reflecting on the looming threat of the Alanga's return and her own position as emperor. She's disturbed by Mariah's final words, which mention a name, Chari, and wonders about the connection to her own powers and companions. After the chaos, Lin appoints a new steward, Ikanui, who impresses her with her quick thinking and background, solidifying her role at the palace. In Chapter 5, Jovis reflects on his uneasy position as captain of the Imperial Guard under Lin's reign. His wounds from a previous attack have healed, but he remains disoriented. Lin is preparing for a diplomatic trip while grappling with the delicate balance of ruling and dismantling the constructs left by her father. Jovis is tasked with ensuring her safety, while managing his own growing conflict about loyalty to the shardless few versus his duty to Lin. He recalls an earlier assassination attempt and feels the weight of his actions. Meanwhile, Lin's powers grow more apparent, and Jovis notices her struggle with trust and her father's legacy. As Jovis navigates through the city, he's confronted by Feline, an Iof Karn tracker, who reveals herself as a hidden threat. The chapter ends with a tense encounter, revealing the complexity of Jovis's alliances and the dangers surrounding him. In Chapter 6, Nisong and her war constructs are on a mission to conquer a small island. They burn down the villagers' homes, but the governor remains hidden, refusing to surrender. Nisong, determined, knocks on his door and challenges him to come out, but he only stalls while his guards prepare for a fight. As the governor's guards emerge, Nisong and her constructs engage in battle. Despite their best efforts, Shell, a trusted ally, is killed. Nisong, devastated, mourns his loss but refuses to let the governor escape. The villagers who resisted are left behind, their bodies burned. Nisong plans to rally more constructs by sending them to other islands to sow chaos, targeting the emperor. The chapter ends with Nisong reflecting on her actions and the looming threat of the Alanga's return, as she tries to come to terms with the consequences of her power and past choices. In Chapter 7, Lin spends the day exploring her father's hidden cavern with Thranna, whose wounds have healed. Lin reflects on the mysteries surrounding her father's work and the possibility that she and Jovis may be Alanga. She finds an ancient sword in the cavern, a weapon used in the play Phoenix Rise to defeat the Alanga, but isn't sure of its true power. As she leaves the cavern, she hears a faint sound and returns to the palace, where she is confronted by Ikanui and the guards. They inform Lin that constructs in the northeastern empire have organized and taken over 2 small isles, possibly threatening further conquests. Lin is filled with dread, realizing the implications of the growing threat. This revelation forces her to confront the reality of her power and the looming dangers she must face. In Chapter 8, Jovis confronts Feline, a former associate from the Eye of Karn, who threatens a merchant while pressing Jovis for information. Despite the tension, Jovis manages to intimidate her into leaving, emphasizing his desire to sever ties with the criminal organization. Afterward, Jovis receives a letter from the merchant revealing that the Shardless Few are blocking caronut shipments to the Empire, threatening the Emperor's position. The letter hints that the Emperor is vulnerable, with potential conspiracies brewing. Jovis realizes that Geo, connected to the Shardless Few, is aware of the palace's secrets, including Lin's use of a mysterious white-bladed sword. Jovis becomes increasingly uneasy as he deciphers the message, which suggests plans to steal the sword and undermine the Emperor's authority. His concerns grow as he realizes that his involvement with the Emperor's court might lead to further danger. In Chapter 9, Falu, now governor of Nephelanu, visits her imprisoned father and struggles with guilt over his treatment of the people. She is tasked with managing the Shardless Few, who threaten her position. After a tense conversation with her father about loyalty and leadership, Falu meets with Geo from the Shardless Few, who offers a temporary truce in exchange for halting the shipment of caro nuts to Imperial. The Shardless Few aim to force the Emperor's abdication, and Geo proposes a map in return for the truce. Despite Falu's reservations, she agrees, with a counter-threat to ensure Geo's compliance. She and Ranami discuss the political situation, including the Emperor's request to visit Nephelanu. As they walk through the city, a child steals Falu's pouch containing the Emperor's missive, adding a sense of urgency to the unfolding events. In Chapter 10, Lin prepares to leave for a series of island visits, strategizing to strengthen her rule amidst increasing threats. The northeastern islands are under siege by constructs, and Lin's priority is to recruit soldiers while securing the support of the island governors. Ikanui informs her that according to Mauga's notes, there are still thousands of constructs scattered across the Empire, some in disrepair and others possibly organizing. Lin plans to visit Rhea, Nephelanu, Hualanor, and Gaelung to solidify alliances, secure resources, and address threats. Ikanui also reports delays in the caro nut shipment from Nephelanu and unrest due to the former governor's excesses. Additionally, a disturbing message from Hirona's net reveals that Alanga artifacts are awakening, signaling potential danger. Lin, frustrated by the uncertainty, prepares to face the unknown, knowing her empire's future depends on her strategic decisions. In Chapter 11, Ranami and Falu chase a street orphan, Ayesh, who tries to steal from them. After catching her, they learn the girl is starving and missing a hand, likely from an earlier incident on a different island. Ayesh reveals she stowed away on a ship to Nephelanu after being thrown overboard. While Falu wants to help the gutter orphans and believes in redemption, Ranami is more cautious, suspecting Ayesh may have ulterior motives. The orphan's story leads them to a chilling revelation. Ayesh is from Unta, an island that has disappeared after a series of earthquakes, including one that lasted for days. Falu grapples with her duty to help orphans while grappling with the consequences of her father's actions. The chapter highlights the tension between justice, forgiveness, and the responsibility to act, especially in the wake of catastrophic events like the fall of Unta. In Chapter 12, Jovis struggles with the pressure from the Shardless Few, who have tasked him with stealing a white-bladed sword from Lin. As he sifts through boxes on the ship, he finds an old play about the Alanga and reflects on his past. Lin catches him in the hold, but their interaction remains tense, and Jovis is reminded of his complex feelings for her. Back in his room, Mephi, Jovis's companion, reveals that he can understand some of the Alanga language from a journal Jovis found earlier. As Jovis begins translating, he uncovers disturbing truths about the Alanga's history. The journal speaks of the Sukai massacre of the Alanga, framing the event as a bloody massacre, not a glorious victory as the Empire's songs claim. The last entry warns of the Alanga's return, signaling impending danger for the Empire. Jovis faces the grim reality of the Alanga's potential resurgence. In Chapter 13, Lin travels to Rhea, her first time leaving the palace since her father's death. She reflects on her creation and the memories her father tried to instill in her. As they arrive, Lin is greeted by a representative of the governor, Ilo, who doesn't meet her at the docks, leading to a tense encounter. Ilo's dismissive behavior triggers Lin's frustration, and she confronts him about his treatment. Lin presents a chest of shards from her citizens, signaling the end of the tithing festival and the construct's rule. However, Ilo rejects her assertion that the time of the constructs is over, showing reluctance to comply. Lin's power and authority are tested as she tries to win the governor's cooperation in addressing the growing threat of the rogue constructs. The chapter ends with Lin recognizing the political tension still ahead, despite her attempts to assert control. In Chapter 14, Jovis continues to navigate his complex relationship with Lin and the growing tensions around the Emperor's rule. In Rhea, he reflects on his past as a smuggler, the challenges of his current position, and the pressure to support Lin's unstable reign. While Lin grapples with the resistance to her authority and her budding powers, Jovis teaches her to control water, though he hesitates to fully share his own abilities. The chapter reveals Jovis's inner conflict as he questions his loyalty to the Shardless Few and the consequences of Lin's rising power. He receives a letter from Geo, urging him to locate a white-bladed sword and hinting at the Shardless Few's involvement in Rhea's unrest. The chapter ends with Jovis feeling watched as he buys a tortoiseshell comb, sensing the looming danger and his growing unease with the situation. In Chapter 15, Lin faces tension with Jovis when he accuses her of having him followed, drawing parallels to her father's authoritarian rule. They argue, but Jovis admits his duty to protect her, and Lin acknowledges her need for his trust. They attend a dinner with Ilo, where Lin struggles to project authority and dignity among the guests, including Ilo's relatives and allies. The dinner reveals the political complexities Lin faces, especially with Ilo's resistance to her dismantling of the constructs and ending the tithing festival. Lin presses Ilo about his lack of marriage to Pulan, uncovering his emotional and financial struggles. She offers to help him by developing a whetstone mine on Pulan's Isle in exchange for his support. Their conversation is interrupted by a screech from Thrana, signaling danger or distress. This prompts Lin to act quickly, feeling the weight of the situation escalating. In Chapter 16, Falu and Ranami care for Ayesh, a young orphan who survived the sinking of Unta. After a rough bath and some nourishment, Ayesh shares her harrowing story of the earthquakes and the destruction of her island. She explains her escape on a stolen boat, though she doesn't know why Unta sank. Falu offers to help Ayesh, and the girl agrees to stay, asking for new clothes. Meanwhile, Falu contemplates the larger issues facing the island, including the Shardless Few and the instability caused by Unta's disaster. Falu spars with Tithus after a construct attack, realizing how unsafe things have become. Later, Ayesh asks Falu to teach her how to fight, which Falu agrees to, despite the potential complications. Ranami, concerned about bringing a new orphan into their home amidst political turmoil, expresses her worries, but Falu remains determined to help the girl, trusting in her instincts. In Chapter 17, Nisong's spy construct returns with news about Cheyenne, who Nisong believes may have created a replica of himself in a cave beneath the palace. Meanwhile, an invasion by Imperial soldiers begins on the island. Nisong, in the middle of creating constructs from villagers' bodies to defend herself, is interrupted by the attack. She orders more villagers to be used to create additional constructs, including children, despite her inner conflict. As the battle rages outside, Nisong works tirelessly, commanding the constructs to fight. Her creations, though powerful, are imperfect and start to falter under the pressure. Amid the chaos, her companion Fran is killed by an enemy arrow. Despite the loss, Nisong and her remaining constructs manage to repel the invaders, but the victory is bittersweet. Nisong, exhausted and guilt-ridden, reflects on the cost of their survival and the inevitable consequences of their actions. In Chapter 18, Lin is attacked in her room by two assassins. Despite not carrying any weapons, Lin defends herself using her newfound water-controlling abilities. Jovis assists, and together they overpower the assassins, though Lin struggles with the aftermath. The confrontation reveals Lin's growing power, but she still feels conflicted about using it. After the attack, Ilo enters, apologizing for the security lapse, but also expressing his ongoing concern for the welfare of the Empire. Lin navigates a tense conversation, offering to send resources to Rhea in exchange for support against the constructs. However, Ilo's refusal to send enough guards highlights the growing dangers to the Empire. Meanwhile, Jovis presses Lin on her decision to support the development of new Whetstone mines, despite the dangers posed by sinking islands like Deerhead and Unta. The chapter ends with devastating news. Unta has sunk, confirming Lin's fears about the mines and their potential connection to the disaster. In Chapter 19, Fallu trains Aish, an orphan who has shown promise with a wooden sword, while reflecting on her growing responsibilities as governor of Nephilanu. Despite Ranami's concerns about Aish's motives, Fallu continues to teach her, offering the orphan a sense of stability. Meanwhile, Fallu's decision regarding the Emperor's visit causes tension with Geo, who questions her commitment to the truce and insists she deny the Emperor's request. Geo reminds Fallu of the Shardless Fuse demands, pushing for her to refuse the Emperor. Fallu, determined to maintain control, refuses to back down, asserting her authority over Nephilanu. She also resists Geo's threat, recognizing that the Emperor's visit could be an opportunity to gain more insight into Lin's intentions. Geo warns that the Sukai dynasty has a history of violence and manipulation, but Fallu remains resolute in her decision to allow the visit. In Chapter 20, Jovis continues his journey with Mephi, reflecting on his past actions and the consequences of his involvement with the Shardless Few. He is troubled by the recent sinking of Unta and Lin's determination to expand the Whetstone mine despite the growing danger. When they arrive in Nephilanu, Jovis has an uneasy encounter with Lin, where he questions her decisions regarding the mine and her priorities. Lin asserts her authority, and Jovis feels conflicted about her approach to leadership. Later, Jovis visits the Shardless Few hideout, hoping to uncover more about the Alanga and their origins. After sneaking into the cave, he finds a room with a mysterious white-bladed sword that matches the one Lin has been instructed to possess. Just as Jovis investigates, Geo appears, clearly displeased with his presence, signaling trouble ahead for Jovis and his investigation. In Chapter 21, Lin struggles with the fallout from her decisions, particularly regarding the expansion of the Whetstone mine, which Jovis has criticized. Despite her anger, she continues to focus on winning Nephilanu's support. During a walk through the city, Lin reflects on her father's harsh rule, contrasting it with Fallu's more humble governance. She confronts Fallu and Ranami about their concerns, revealing that they want Lin to abdicate in favor of a council. Lin argues for unity, promising to address the Empire's problems, including the sinking islands and the dangers of the Alanga artifacts. Fallu and Ranami, though resistant, insist that a more collective leadership is needed. The conversation escalates into a tense standoff, with Lin asserting her right to lead despite the pressure to step down. Just as the tension peaks, Jovis enters, warning Lin of an attack, signaling danger ahead. In Chapter 22, Jovis interacts with Geo, who questions his loyalties while discussing the Alanga sword Jovis discovered. Geo warns Jovis about Lin's potential misuse of power, but Jovis remains defensive, reluctant to choose sides. After a brief, tense confrontation, Jovis leaves with the sword and encounters his mother, whom he hasn't seen in 7 years. Their reunion is filled with mixed emotions, with his mother scolding him for his choices but still showing affection. She informs him of the spread of the bog cough in Anau and reassures him that his father is fine. Jovis then goes to meet Lin, who has sent maidservants to fetch him. However, as he arrives at the docks, he witnesses a horrific scene. A maidservant is dragged in, bloodied and wounded by war constructs. This unexpected attack forces Jovis to take immediate action as danger looms over the city. In Chapter 23, Lin is shaken by the attack on her maidservants by war constructs, leading her to worry about their safety and the increasing threat to the Empire. She discusses the situation with Fallu and Ranami, who suggest that she abdicate, citing the sinking islands and the instability caused by her father's reign. Lin, however, refuses to step down, stressing her desire to unite the islands and confront the looming dangers, including the awakening of Alanga artifacts. She later discovers a strange stone face in a refuse pile, which she believes could be linked to the white-bladed sword mentioned in her father's notes. As tensions rise, Lin receives troubling news about a retreat in the northeast, signaling a growing threat from the constructs. Lin resolves to stop whetstone mining, despite the political and economic fallout, and confronts the challenges ahead with determination, but not without personal turmoil. In Chapter 24, Ranami reflects on the challenges of ruling Nefelanu, particularly the difficulties Falu faces in managing the island's political landscape amidst the rising tensions with the Empire. The Shardless Few's presence looms, and Ranami grows increasingly suspicious of Ayesh, the orphan Falu has taken in. Ayesh is caught stealing food and overhearing sensitive conversations, which raises concerns that she may be a spy for Geo or the Shardless Few. Ranami follows Ayesh into the city but loses her, only to return to the palace and confront Falu about her suspicions. Despite Falu's belief in Ayesha's innocence, Ranami insists that Ayesha's actions could jeopardize their plans. Meanwhile, Falu decides to send out the much-needed Karo nuts despite the risks, fearing that Geo's influence might destabilize their rule. The chapter ends with Ranami realizing that Ayesh might have been aware of her surveillance, deepening her distrust. In Chapter 25, Jovis reflects on his strained relationship with Lin and his worries about her well-being. He is increasingly troubled by the pressures of his past connections, especially with the Iop Karn, who might use him again. His mother suggests he help Lin with her emotional burden, but Jovis remains skeptical about Lin's motives. Meanwhile, Lin is dealing with her father's legacy and the mysterious power of the bone shards. She reveals to Jovis that her father had a memory machine that stored memories in liquid form, which she has been using to understand the Empire's secrets. As they discuss their mutual distrust and the shared burdens of leadership, Jovis presents Lin with an Alanga journal he found in Nefelanu. Lin is able to read the script, revealing that the language is tied to bone shard magic, something Lin has been secretly studying. This discovery deepens their connection as secrets begin to unravel. In Chapter 26, Lin and Jovis make a breakthrough in their research. The Alanga language and bone shard magic are the same. While preparing to land at Imperial, Lin tests an Alanga artifact and confirms that the statue's eyes open in the presence of Alanga magic, suggesting artifacts serve as a warning system. This confirms other Alanga are active across the islands, including one on Imperial. Lin worries that her identity as Alanga could be used against her politically. Upon returning to the palace, Lin learns devastating news. Elo has defected over the Whetstone ban and now supports a woman claiming to be Lin's older half-sister, leading the Construct army and claiming the throne. Meanwhile, Lin is visited by a monk named Reagan, who reveals that the Cloud Tree monasteries preserve knowledge of the Alanga and that he too is one. Lin and Jovis now know there are more Alanga emerging, with unknown intentions. In Chapter 27, Jovis reflects on his loneliness and his growing discomfort with Reagan, the Cloud Tree monk, who has been sent to assist Lin. Tensions rise as Jovis becomes more involved in Lin's struggles to maintain control over the Empire. Lin is faced with mounting pressure for her abdication, particularly from the Shardless Few and a mysterious half-sister leading the Construct army. Jovis contemplates his role and his growing uncertainty about Lin's leadership. Meanwhile, Lin receives an envoy from the Construct army, Leaf, who demands her abdication in favor of her supposed sister. Lin refuses, asserting that the offer is not a negotiation, but a threat. Later, Jovis discovers a secret in the palace, a hidden room containing a birth record stating that Lin Sukai, the supposed heir, died at 3 years old. Jovis is left shaken, questioning the true identity of Lin. In Chapter 28, Nisong continues her aggressive conquest of the Empire, burning towns and rounding up survivors to harvest their shards. Her constructs, including Coral and Leaf, struggle with the brutal violence, but Nisong justifies it as necessary for survival and her ultimate goal, to become emperor. After hearing the news of a powerful island called Luangan, Nisong sends a construct named Grass to gather information. However, when Nisong and Leaf arrive to rescue Grass, they find Luangan sinking into the Endless Sea due to a massive quake. Nisong is devastated, unable to reach Grass before the island disappears beneath the waves. With the island gone, Nisong is left to confront the overwhelming realization that the Empire may be doomed to destruction, and her quest for power may come at the cost of everything she's fought for. In Chapter 29, Lin arrives at Hualinor, determined to secure the island's support against the growing threat of the Construct Army and the Shardless Few. She struggles with the pressures of leadership, questioning her identity as the Emperor's daughter and the truth about her origins. Lin wears the traditional attire of Hualinor, hoping to blend in, but her arrival is met with formality and suspicion. The governor, Weilun, and her family greet Lin coldly, and during dinner, Lin offers the shards as a gesture of goodwill, explaining that she will not use them to power constructs. However, Weilun challenges her, questioning how Lin plans to defend the island without constructs. Lin promises to build an army, but the conversation leaves her uneasy. She senses that Weilun is hiding something, and to secure Hualinor's support, Lin must uncover the truth behind her cold reception. In Chapter 30, Jovis grapples with his growing unease about Lin's leadership and the complexities of their relationship. While in Hualinor, Lin confides in him about her suspicions regarding the governor, Weilun, who seems indifferent to her leadership despite the return of the shards. Lin plans to investigate Weilun's motives and asks Jovis to patrol the palace to gather information. Jovis, torn between his loyalty to Lin and his duties to the Shardless Few, prepares to smuggle the sword to Khafra in exchange for the supply of Karo nuts. However, Jovis's internal conflict grows as he questions whether Lin deserves to be deposed. Meanwhile, his bond with Mephi deepens. That night, Jovis sneaks into Lin's room to replace her sword with his own, completing his covert task. As he attempts to leave, he encounters Regan, who confronts him, signaling more trouble ahead. In Chapter 31, Lin sneaks into the governor's room at night, determined to uncover what Weilun is hiding. After scaling the roof and entering through a window, Lin finds a journal belonging to Weilun revealing unsettling connections to Cheyenne's experiments. Lin realizes that Weilun and her family may not be who they appear to be, but constructs created by Cheyenne. As Lin attempts to remove shards from Weilun's body, she is caught, leading to a violent confrontation. After hastily replacing the shards, Lin escapes the room, but fears she may have destabilized Weilun's construct. Her actions leave Weilun vulnerable, and Lin realizes that her interference may cause a deadly breakdown in Weilun's body. As Lin flees the palace, she is pursued by guards. Feeling a growing sense of dread about the consequences of her actions and the unraveling of her own identity. In Chapter 32, Lin and Jovis continue to deal with rising tensions in Hualinor. Lin confronts Jovis about his secretive actions as she discovers he is working with the Iop of Karn. Jovis reveals his intentions were not to align with them, but to deliver the sword to Khafra in exchange for a cure for the bog cough. Khafra, however, seems to have more sinister plans for Jovis's power, believing him to be Alanga. A confrontation ensues with Jovis fighting against Khafra's forces. Lin, having tracked Jovis's movements, intervenes, revealing her care for him despite their tensions. She helps him, and the two are forced to face their feelings for each other, leading to a passionate moment. As they prepare to leave, they realize Khafra and his men have disappeared, leaving more uncertainty about their future and the looming threats from both the Iop Karn and the Construct Army. In Chapter 33, Lin confronts the truth about the governor of Hualinor, Weilun, who turns out to be a construct created by Lin's father. After discovering that Weilun's family had been replaced by constructs, Lin explains the situation to Chala, Weilun's adoptive son, who struggles with the revelation that his family was never real. Despite the shock and grief, Lin offers Chala a chance to mourn in his own way. A confrontation with the remaining constructs ensues, where Lin uses her engraving tool to break their programming, leading to a bloody battle. With the constructs defeated, Chala acknowledges the truth about his family's origin. Meanwhile, Lin grapples with the growing bond she feels with Jovis and his growing support, as he reassures her about the changes in Thrana, who is undergoing a hibernation phase similar to Mephi's. The chapter ends with uncertainty about what lies ahead. In Chapter 34, Jovis struggles with his emotions after the kiss with Lin, feeling the weight of their differences. He focuses on their mission to deal with the Construct Army, with Lin needing support from Chala, the governor of Hualinor. Despite resistance, Chala agrees to commit his guards to their cause. Meanwhile, Jovis reflects on the challenges of their alliance and his growing feelings for Lin. As preparations to leave Hualin progress, Lin reveals her suspicion about Regan, and Jovis confronts her about the dangers of using the memory machine on people. Lin admits to experimenting with it, but it fails to reveal anything meaningful. However, When she shows Jovis a sword she found, they discover strange carvings on it, resembling the Alanga's writings. The sword's inscription reads, "Die," leading to a shocking revelation that ties into the dangerous forces they're facing. In Chapter 35, Nisong wakes up on an island after the destruction of Luangan, surrounded by debris and bodies. Despite her injuries, she searches for Leaf, finding him dead next to a sea serpent. Overcome with grief, she recalls her promise to protect him. Coral, now her only remaining ally, comforts her and suggests they stay on the island away from further destruction. Nisong, determined to make their deaths meaningful, decides not to retreat but to use the bodies of the fallen for future constructs. She instructs Coral to gather the war constructs and survivors, preparing to build a new foundation. Nisong envisions a campaign to take Gelung and continue her fight for vengeance against the Empire. The chapter highlights her resolve to honor the sacrifices of her fallen companions by using their memories and bodies to advance her cause. In Chapter 36, Falu faces an escalating crisis on Nefelanu Island. As refugees flood in from sinking islands like Unta, tensions rise between Falu and the local landowners, culminating in a violent outburst by a petitioner with a knife. Falu successfully defends herself, but the chaos leaves her unsettled. She seeks advice from her imprisoned father, learning that Nefelanu has no agreements with Gelung, who has requested aid against the approaching construct army. Despite her father's dismissive stance, Falu recognizes the looming threat and the need to act. Later, she confronts Geo, a member of the Shardless Few, who pressures her to stop sending aid and let the Empire collapse. Falu disagrees, arguing for compassion and questioning Geo's tactics. The chapter ends with Geo threatening Falu and the Shardless Few's potential wrath, leaving Falu to reflect on her decisions and the consequences of her actions. In Chapter 37, Lin reflects on her position and relationships as she prepares to face Gelung. Thrana, having undergone a transformation, is now stronger and larger, providing Lin with much-needed support. Lin is also dealing with her complicated feelings towards Jovis, whose emotional proximity challenges her control. He apologizes for judging her, but their connection remains tense. Meanwhile, the ship carrying Lin and her allies encounters a storm. Reagan, a monk with cloud juniper-enhanced abilities, struggles with the weather, adding to the stress. Lin contemplates the political and personal burden she carries. Later, she confronts Nisong about the locked rooms in the palace, leading to a conversation about their shared history and the manipulation of bone shard magic. Lin offers Nisong 30 days to prove she can master it or face execution. Lin's power, manipulation, and the threat of betrayal hang heavily as she navigates both her leadership and personal conflicts. In Chapter 38, Lin and her party arrive at Gailung, where they face Nisong's army. Lin reflects on her father's manipulations, feeling the weight of his influence as she contemplates her bond with her Osalan, Thrana, and her complicated relationship with Jovis. Lin is offered support from Urame, the governor of Gailung, but the looming threat of Nisong's growing army remains. Upon meeting Nisong in a tense standoff, Lin offers her a replica of Shien in exchange for peace and a cessation of attacks. Nisong, however, desires more than just peace. She seeks retribution and the suffering of those who caused her pain. She demands either Lin's empire or her death, setting the stage for a final confrontation. Lin attempts to take action, but is stopped by the encroaching constructs, as Nisong gives her until morning to surrender. In Chapter 39, Jovis confronts the consequences of his choices and the lies he has told. He is troubled by his past decisions, particularly his failure to see through Elan's manipulations. When he discovers that Elan has made swords with deadly commands, Jovis feels betrayed. He and Lin continue to prepare for the coming battle, but their relationship is strained. Lin's frustrations with Jovis lead to a heated argument about trust, power, and her fears for Gaelung's survival. Lin reveals a shocking truth about her origin. She is not the Emperor's daughter, but a replica made by Cheyenne, constructed from pieces of his citizens. This revelation deepens Jovis's internal conflict. When Lin finds a letter Jovis wrote to the Shardless Few, he admits to his past actions but pleads for understanding. Lin, feeling betrayed, orders Jovis to leave, leaving their future uncertain as the battle looms. In Chapter 40, Lin deals with the aftermath of sending Jovis away, struggling with the emotional toll of his betrayal. As she tries to regain her composure, she receives support from Thrana and the trust of Urame and her household, who offer their shards for Lin's plans. Despite her pain, Lin resolves to continue her mission to save Gaelung and defeat the constructs. She begins creating a new construct from the shards, intending to infiltrate the enemy camp and alter the commands of their forces. As Lin works, Regan offers his assistance, but she remains focused on the task ahead, knowing that the outcome of the battle depends on her actions. Once the construct is complete, she sends it toward the encampment, hoping it will help turn the tide in their favor, despite the absence of Jovis and the lingering uncertainty about his true loyalties. In Chapter 41, Nisong prepares for the upcoming battle, commanding the sea serpent to coral and ensuring it stays hidden unless needed. As she reflects on her journey and the loss of her companions, she notices something unusual in her camp, a shambler moving out of place. Upon investigating, she realizes the shambler is a construct sent by Lin, meant to infiltrate her camp and sabotage her forces. Nisong's anger shifts to panic as she discovers the high-quality shards inside the shambler, confirming that Lin has resorted to using Bone's shard magic against her. Determined to act swiftly, Nisong orders her war constructs to prepare for an immediate attack, knowing time is running out. She considers using the sea serpent, but opts to wait, hoping the damage done by Lin's constructs is minimal. The chapter ends with Nisong readying for battle, her focus on defeating Lin's forces before more sabotage occurs. In Chapter 42, Jovis, reflecting on his failures and mistakes, walks through the rain feeling the weight of his decisions. After being sent away by Lin, he contemplates his past actions, realizing his desire for more than friendship with her. Mephi, his Osselin companion, urges him to return and help Lin, but Jovis is torn. While drinking at a tavern, he finds a flask containing Regan's memories, which leads him to a realization about Regan's true nature. He recalls Regan's actions and manipulations, feeling a sense of duty to help Lin despite their strained relationship. Jovis vows to keep his oath to the people, even if Lin no longer trusts him. Realizing Lin and Thranna are in danger, Jovis decides to return to help, even if it means facing his past mistakes and risking everything. He prepares to re-enter the battle and fulfill his promise to the people. In Chapter 43, Ranami struggles with the emotional weight of Falu leaving for battle. As Falu prepares to depart, they share a quiet, tender moment with Ranami grappling with her fears and doubts. Falu leaves her with the responsibility of managing Nefelanu and asks her to look after Ayesh, who has become like a daughter to them. When Ranami encounters Ayesh, she reassures the girl and offers her a place in their family. As Falu leaves, Ranami faces her responsibilities and the tension with Geo, the leader of the Shardless Few. She confronts Geo in his secret lair, calling him out for his self-righteousness and refusal to act, despite the suffering around them. Ranami accuses Geo of being the true villain, refusing to help those in need. She vows to reveal the truth about him if Falu does not return, cementing her resolve to stand up for what's right. In Chapter 44, Lin faces a critical moment as the Construct army approaches Gaelung ahead of schedule, throwing her plans into disarray. Despite the urgency, she is forced to confront Regan, who reveals his true intentions and his belief in Alanga superiority. Lin's construct plan has failed, and she must rely on a small group of soldiers, including Regan, for help. As she tries to manage the situation, Regan uses his powers against her, attempting to expose her Alanga heritage to the soldiers. Lin resists, determined to protect the Empire and its people. Tensions escalate when Regan turns on Lin, using his abilities to attack, causing destruction around them. In the midst of their confrontation, Lin's Osselin companion Thranna is knocked out, leaving Lin to fight on alone. Lin's resolve strengthens as she realizes her commitment to the people, not her power, and vows to protect Gaelung. In Chapter 45, Jovis returns to the battlefield after being dismissed by Lin, hoping to make amends and warn her about Regan's betrayal. As they approach Gaelung, Jovis and Mephi hear signs of fighting, realizing the Construct army has already begun its assault. Despite Jovis's physical limitations, he pushes himself forward, determined to help. He finds Lin amidst the chaos, and they reluctantly work together, with Jovis using his powers to defend the palace. Regan confronts Lin, attempting to expose her Alanga heritage, but Jovis intervenes, using his abilities to stop Regan's attack. Lin is reluctant to accept Jovis's help, still angered by his past actions, but Jovis makes it clear that the soldiers need him. The battle intensifies with the arrival of war constructs, and Lin focuses on dealing with them while Jovis holds back the Shamblers. Their combined efforts provide a temporary defense, but the outcome remains uncertain. In Chapter 46, Nisong fights fiercely on the battlefield, driven by grief and anger for her fallen companions, Shell, Frond, Grass, and Leaf. As the war constructs make their way toward Gailung, Nisong clashes with soldiers, using her cudgel and war beast to break through their defenses. Amid the chaos, she recognizes Lin and a monk on the battlefield, revealing that Alanga powers are involved. Nisong's forces, including her shamblers, are slowly overwhelmed by the quake-like tremors sent by Reagan, but she remains determined. Despite mounting losses, Nisong pushes forward, believing victory will bring justice and rest for her fallen friends. Realizing her forces are losing, she reluctantly calls for Coral's help with the Sea Serpent, her last card to play. She signals with a red scarf, summoning the Gull construct, and vows to crush the Empire, no matter the cost, to avenge her companions and achieve her vision of justice. In Chapter 47, Lin fights fiercely against the war constructs attacking Gailung. She uses her Bone Shard magic to rewrite the construct's commands, aided by Thranna, her loyal Ocelin. As the battle intensifies, Lin pushes herself harder, determined to protect her people and avoid the same fate she had with Bayan. Amid the chaos, she receives unexpected help from Faluser, who arrives with her guards to assist in the fight despite her reluctance to support Lin. Lin and Thranna continue to battle their way through, with Lin reflecting on her struggles and the sacrifices she's made. As the constructs begin to falter, Lin's resolve strengthens, but a new threat emerges. A massive sea serpent summoned by Nisong's magic rises from the slopes. Lin realizes the gravity of the situation as the battle takes a dangerous turn. In Chapter 48, Jovis faces Reagan in a tense battle, with Reagan threatening him with a sword. Jovis struggles to fight against Reagan's superior Alanga-enhanced strength and speed, relying on his magic and the help of Mephi. Despite his best efforts, Jovis is overpowered by Reagan, who reveals the dark truth about his past and the deaths of his old monastery. Mephi attempts to assist, but Reagan's strength and control over water make him a formidable opponent. In a desperate attempt, Jovis uses Reagan's Ocelin, Lozi, as leverage to force Reagan to retreat. However, their battle is interrupted when a massive sea serpent appears behind them, with Nisong riding it, signaling a new and more dangerous threat. Jovis's attempt to stop the serpent with his magic proves futile as it charges toward them, bringing the battle to a perilous new stage. In Chapter 49, Falu battles the sea serpent and war constructs, fighting to protect the gates of Gailung. Alongside her comrades, she struggles with the reality of war and her role in it, realizing the brutal cost of survival. Falu and Tithys fight in sync, fending off various beasts. However, the appearance of the enormous sea serpent changes the course of the battle. Falu devises a plan to flank the serpent, but it proves a dangerous task. The creature, with its massive size and deadly claws, wreaks havoc on the soldiers. Falu tries to take down the rider controlling the serpent, but is delayed when Tithys is killed by the creature's jaws. Devastated by Tithys' death, Falu faces a dire situation as the gates finally break, signaling the potential fall of Gailung. In Chapter 50, Lin faces Reagan in a battle for control, both physically and ideologically. Reagan blocks her path to the gates, and the two clash with their respective powers, as Lin uses her water manipulation to defend herself. Reagan, empowered by his use of cloud juniper berries, fights with superior skill and strength, pushing Lin back. Lin, struggling with her own lack of combat training, finds herself relying on Thranna and Mephi for support. Reagan attempts to sway Lin, offering her power and leadership over the Alanga, but Lin refuses, insisting that she will protect the people of the Empire. The battle intensifies as Reagan uses his Alanga abilities to create barriers of water, but Lin remains resolute in her refusal to abandon her people. The chapter concludes with Reagan's declaration that they will always be enemies if Lin continues to oppose him. In Chapter 51, Jovis struggles to reach the palace, battered from his fight with Reagan and the difficult climb. He and Mephi encounter a sea serpent inside the gates, wreaking havoc as soldiers fight desperately. Jovis realizes Lin is still fighting, but needs help. He prepares to face Geo, who appears leading a new army, confusing Jovis with his sudden change of heart. Jovis initially questions Geo's motives, suspecting betrayal, but Geo insists he's there to help, claiming to want to protect the Empire. Just as tensions rise between them, Geo reveals his true nature as an Alanga, using wind-based magic to knock Jovis down the hill. Jovis loses consciousness, realizing the truth about Gio's powers just as everything goes dark. This chapter highlights Jovis' internal conflict, Gio's hidden abilities, and the growing danger posed by the sea serpent and the shifting loyalties in the battle. In Chapter 52, Lin is locked in a tense battle with Regan, who continually attacks with both magic and a sword. Despite her best efforts, Lin is being pushed back, and the situation grows increasingly dire as the sea serpent wreaks havoc on the palace. Gio, leading the Shardless Few, arrives unexpectedly, displaying his wind-based magic, which overwhelms Regan's powers. Lin uses the momentary advantage to strike at Regan with a shard from Thranna's horn, causing Regan to be temporarily incapacitated. As Regan struggles with the injury, Lin, with Thranna's help, is able to evade him and prepare to fight back. With a final strike, Lin carves a command into the shard, preventing Regan from killing anyone, including her. She then rushes back into battle to deal with the sea serpent and the remaining forces. The chapter highlights Lin's determination, the power shift with Gio's arrival, and the final confrontation with Regan. In Chapter 53, Jovis regains consciousness after a fall, disoriented and bleeding from a head injury. As he struggles to get up, he realizes that Mephi is missing, causing him panic. He searches desperately for his friend, recalling how Mephi had always been by his side. As Jovis scans the area, he stumbles upon a confrontation between Gio and the sea serpent. Gio, using his wind and water magic, is attacking the serpent, causing chaos in the palace courtyard. Jovis watches, but his focus is consumed by his worry for Mephi. After recalling the events and searching for Mephi, Jovis deduces that the Eye of Karn must have taken him. The chapter shows Jovis' desperation and his growing realization that the Eye of Karn, a group he now believes is responsible for Mephi's disappearance, may be behind the loss. In Chapter 54, Lin watches as Gio battles the sea serpent with overwhelming power, using his wind and water abilities. While the battle rages on, Lin contemplates her position as Emperor and her identity as Alanga. She is torn between her duties and the desire to run away with Thranna. As she engages in the battle, she confronts the sea serpent, climbing its massive neck to manipulate its shards and bring it down. After succeeding, she is met with the fearful admiration of the crowd, who begin chanting her name. Lin and Jovis later meet in a private room where Jovis confesses his love for her and reveals that Mephi has been taken by Khafra. Despite the tension between them, they share a passionate kiss before Jovis departs to find Mephi. Lin gives him her blessing, knowing they may never meet again. In Chapter 55, Nisong finds Coral, who has been thrown from the sea serpent, and drags her to safety away from the battlefield. As they rest in the foliage, Nisong reflects on the loss of the battle and the failure of her cause. Coral, gravely wounded by an arrow, asks to return to Myla. Nisong, realizing that they've lost, vows to take her back there. Despite the loss, Nisong tries to reassure Coral that they still have a chance to start anew. However, Coral dies from her wounds, and Nisong, feeling the weight of defeat, resolves to return home and rebuild. As she leaves the site, she remembers the Cloud Tree monk's powers and decides to pursue him, believing there's always a way to fix things and return from failure. She walks alone, but with renewed determination, planning to find the monk and seek a way forward. In Chapter 56, Lin reflects on her position as both Emperor and Alanga. Despite the victory over the sea serpent, she grapples with the reality of her power's revelation, fearing the consequences it will have on her rule. The Shardless Few, surprisingly, do not demand her abdication, but offer aid in cleaning up the aftermath. Falu prepares to leave, promising to return and teach Lin swordplay. Lin's thoughts turn to Gio, and she summons him to a private meeting. In their conversation, Lin confronts Gio about his true identity as Dione, an Alanga who survived the massacre and now leads the Shardless Few. Dione reveals his bitter past and intentions to rebuild his lost people, but he rejects Lin's attempt at cooperation, stating that they can never work together due to her lineage. Lin is left with the weight of her newly revealed enemy and the challenge of moving forward. In Chapter 57, Ranami grapples with the aftermath of the battle and the revelation of her father-in-law's betrayal. She frees Falu's father from his cell, accusing him of spying for the Shardless Few, and sends him away with money and supplies, ensuring he can no longer harm Nefelanu or Falu. Later, she follows Ayesh, concerned about the girl's behavior. Ayesh is seen secretly meeting a creature with the ability to talk, which Ranami identifies as similar to Mephi and Thranna. Ayesh explains that she found the creature, named Shark, after the fall of Unta and rescued it from being thrown overboard by sailors. Relieved that Ayesh isn't a spy, Ranami offers the creature a place at the palace. Ayesh's anxiety dissipates as she introduces Shark to Ranami, and despite the unusual situation, Ranami accepts the creature, ready to face the challenges ahead.